Hey. So I wanted to go through all the bikes I've ever owned on video. Someone thought it would be a good idea. So I've got my list. I'm gonna go through them. I was writing a list the other day of all the bikes I've ever owned, just as there's not many, I think there's like 15 here. But I wanted to make a small video on it because I thought it'd be kind of interesting seeing the progress from like little bike to what I'm in now. I got my list, so let's go. My first bike was an automatic Puck 50cc when I was, I think, about 7 or 8 years old. Dad started me off on that because that's all he could get his hand on at the time, I assume, and it's probably good to learn how to ride a bike without a clutch first. Out at Learmonth, which is a town close to us, I'd ride around this football oval over and over and over again for God knows how long, probably 4 or 5 hours of just constant riding, fill the tank, constant riding. It was something that I think even Dad noticed that I wasn't going to give up anytime soon, and something that stuck with me from when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So the RV90 was a little Suzuki sand bike, I think, because the tyres are really, really wide. It's almost one of those little three-wheeler things. I'll show you a picture. That was a little manual. I think it had 4 gears, maybe 5, and it topped out at like 35, 40 mile an hour. That was the thing I learned how to ride manual, and that was pretty fun. Dad was riding trials bikes at the time, and I wanted a trials bike, but when I was young I didn't just basically get whatever I wanted. You know, I suppose that's pretty good parenting. I didn't ever get what I just wanted, so I rode that RV around and actually used it like a trials bike. There's this little ridge, and I'd ride along the top of the ridge on this RV90 with tyres like this. And when Dad saw that, he knew that I've learned how to ride a manual bike. I've done my time on something that no kid wants to be seen on. But I appreciated it and I loved it. I washed it every time we went out. I would wash it. Sometimes we'd stay out too late and my dad would wash it for me. Thanks, Dad. But that was a big thing. Like, if you take your bike out, you wash it after you're done. That was a big, big thing that Dad always, always, you know, yeah. So when Dad realised that I was riding that like a trials bike for quite a while, he started letting me ride his Scorpion. Now, I put this in the list because I rode it a lot. Technically, it wasn't mine, but I saw it as mine because I got to ride it. So I moved on to this Scorpia pretty much around the same time. And that's a big jump compared to the RV. Yeah. Then what's next? Yeah, that's right. Then Dad got his hands on a TY175 Yamaha, yellow and white. Now they're worth, like, even a crap one's worth like, I don't know, almost $2,000. Dad bought it for me in probably 1999, 2000, somewhere around there, for like $600 from his friend. I rode that. I never really had the confidence to do trials when I was young. So I rode that around, did trials, bike riding stuff for ages. That wore off pretty quick because once I sort of got into it, I was doing like trialsy sort of stuff with Dad. Kind of got boring over time. So his partner had a, hello, sorry, dog there. His partner had a little 250 CB, and I showed a lot of interest in it because it's something I hadn't ridden before because it's a road bike. And so Dad said, yeah, no worries, you can have that, but we need to sell your TY175 first. And I was like, okay, sick, no worries at all, right? So we got that. Well, I got that. Hello. So I got the CB, and that I did ride it on, there's a drag strip that I just went up and down, up and down, up and down. Dad started teaching me how to ride the bike with a bit of skill. So cones counter steering and all that. So I was actually a really decent like road rider when I was like 12, riding this 250 around. So I was doing counter steering and emergency braking and all this really cool stuff when I was like 12, because I always liked a challenge. Then I went back into the trials bike a little bit, not much, just a little bit. I got to keep the CB, which sat at my house. Now, the Sherco, the Sherco trials bike. Dad realised I was a lot older at this point. I was, I think, 16-ish. 16-ish? Yeah. I was about 16. I had my arms, I know that, on the in the car. Dog's making noise. And I said to Dad that I'm showing interest again in riding trials bikes, and this is when I was a bit older. And he was always pretty chill about these things. He wasn't ever like, no, let's not do that, or no, you can't have that. He always he didn't let me have whatever I wanted, but we always found a way. I'd always either miss out on something else, or I'd only get to have it on the weekends and things like that. So within 20 minutes, that's like Dad, he just gets things done. Within 20 minutes, we were at a dude's house who was selling his pretty modern at the time trials bike. It was a Sherco 280, I think, from like 03. But there was a bit of a deal with Dad. He said, all right, you can have this, but you're buying it over time. And he said, but you can't ride it. Can you imagine a 16-year-old not being allowed, so Dad bought it, right, put it in his shed. I can never get the time frame right. It was definitely, I think I paid $600 off it before I was allowed to ride it. So it was like $50 a fortnight. Probably only 6 months or something, but 6 months just staring at a bike like that. So after about 6 months of paying it off, I think I paid about $600 off the $3,000. Dad realised that I wasn't complaining. The bike just sat. I didn't touch it. I didn't start it or anything like that. I just stared at it all the time. And I think he realised it was probably time to let me ride it. I rode it quite a bit, not a heck of a lot, but I had it for a while. I remember the first day I ever rode it, I had Deb practice. Deb is a social function for teenagers in high school, secondary college, and I rode it for the first time out in the Creswick bush, and then Dad took me to Deb practice when I was 17, I think, 16, 17. I came just in normal clothes, which is you're meant to, but I smelled like petrol. And my date was like, what? Why do you smell like fuel? And I go, I sat riding on my dirt bike. What? That was just normal to smell like petrol as a 16-year-old boy. I kept that for a while, but because I didn't see Dad as much, because I had girlfriends and hobbies and mates, the bike kind of sat, and I'd legally take it out to the bush and ride it myself. But after a while, it just sort of lost its thing, because the trials bikes were about me and Dad, like what we used to do, and without him being around, it wasn't as fun. I feel like I was on trials bikes just to hang out with Dad, So that lost its flame pretty quick. And then I didn't ride for a while until I was 18-ish, I think. Yeah, and then I was like, oh, hey Dad, can you help me get the CB250 registered, because I'd like to ride that on the road. He's like, shit, yeah, that'd be great. So we got that registered. Dad got it registered. That was pretty quick. This point I was definitely 18, I'm pretty sure. And funny story, in this country, back when I got my license, I don't know, 12 years ago, you have to go do a course. Now, you had a choice of doing a 1-day course or a 2-day course to get your L's. There was no way Dad was going to let me do a 2-day course, because the first day is how to pick up a motorcycle if you drop it, how to start it, So I ended up just doing the 1-day course. Dad knew, he said, so if you pass today, you're allowed to ride away from the course with a motorcycle. I said, yeah. He went, right, cool. So he put my CB250, registered CB250, in the back of his Hilux, dropped me off at the course, knew I was going to pass, because again, I was doing years of riding with like emergency braking, emergency counter steering, all that. He knew I'd just smash it out of the park. Funny story too, when I was on my, when I went and did my L's, those bikes are designed not to stall. If you're stalling those bikes, you're doing something wrong. So you can actually put them on their lock, like their steering lock. So lean the bike over so it drops its bar. You can let go of the handlebars, just put your hands on the tank, lean, and let the thing just do this. So I sat there waiting for my turn. He said, you can do whatever you want, just ride up and down there if you want, do circles, we don't care, just wait your turn. I was like, alright, cool. So yeah, lock the handlebars like that, let them go, sort of just lean the right way, and you can just ride around circles with your hands on the tank like this. Some of the other L-plater people didn't really enjoy me doing things like that because they thought I was a bit of a smartass, but I am. So anyway, passed my test. Dad took the bike out of the trailer, out of the Hilux, and I rode home. That is nothing compares to that feeling when, at that point, of course, nothing compares to that. Nothing. Being allowed to ride on the road, because at this point I just had my L's in the car, and then I've got my L's on the bike, and you can ride on your own, obviously. Nothing compared to that feeling for me. Riding, I'm like, this has got to be illegal. There's something about this, it's got to be illegal, and it wasn't. And it just started me on my trip to riding on the road, really. After I got my L's, and then all my mates had cars, so I went and got a car instead and put the bike in the shed and deregistered it and just drove around in my Corolla, a 1987 Corolla that I spent way too much money on. I'll tell you about that another time. And then there was a massive break there. I didn't ride motorbikes for 2 years, maybe. I rode Dad's bikes. He always had a second motorcycle or his partner's motorcycle, so I rode bikes at this point, but I didn't own one for quite a while. Then Dad said to me one day that he was going to Europe. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he offered me to go too. Now, no one's going to say no to that. No one's going to say no to 4 months in Europe. And he was going to do it all on his motorbike. I'm like, I'm game. And I didn't really have much money, so Dad sort of fronted that, most of it anyway. And so, look, you go and find a bike. You've got 4 months to do it. I don't want to spend too much because it's probably something you're not going to have after this because, I'm buying it. And I rode that around for, before and after I got back and all that, probably 6 months worth of riding. And that was a 1200 Bandit. Now that was the next one, the 1200 Bandit. If I was in a position to have more than one, I would definitely have another 1200 Bandit. It was slightly uncomfortable, but the power was great. It was definitely one of my favourite bikes. I mean, I have the GS now, but it was definitely one of my favourite of all time bikes. But again, technically I didn't buy that, Dad bought that, but it was mine. So that was that one. Then after, I don't know, a couple of years, again riding Dad's bikes through there because he was pretty trustworthy with me, he didn't mind me riding his. Then I was like, I really want another bike, and I called Dad. I was funding this. I called Dad and said, I want to buy another trials bike. He's like, do you really want another one? He's like, you'll just get bored of it. You'll never get time to go out. You'll get bored. I made that phone call to tell Dad, hey, I'm going to buy another trials bike. And within 10 minutes, he convinced me to go and buy a road bike and start riding on the road again. Again, I'm not shitting on him. That was a really good decision. Because again, that if I bought a trials bike, it'd be already gone. But it was so funny. I made that phone call to say, Dad, I'm going to ride trials again. He's like, oh, that's good. You'll get bored of it though. You should ride a road bike. And I did. Within 2 weeks, I had my CBR Blackbird, which is at the time, I think it was like top 4 or 5 fastest bikes in the world. And that was pretty cool. That was my first big boy bike, apart from the Bandit. That it was mine, and just insane bike. I think like on the way home from Ararat, I think I topped like 200 k's on that new strip in the dark. Alright, dark. Got that home, rode that around for almost a year, I think, and my back and stuff started to hurt. And because I was only commuting on it, because I never really saw Dad much, and he was the only one I was really riding with. I started riding his XJ because I had a couple of issues with mine. It was just, this CBR just had some dirty fuel in it, so it was running really weird. So I was riding his XJ around when my bike was having problems. And I just realised that, yeah, it's got no power compared to the CBR, but it's just so much more comfortable. And I think that was just my maturity moving up in the world a little bit. Realising that it's not all about power and how you look, it's about, you know, the comfort of the bike and all that. So I had to give the XJ back to Dad because, you know, it's not mine. We were having a baby, and I was really nervous about owning a motorcycle and 2 cars and a house and all that, and having a baby as well. I thought having a motorbike is a luxury. It's definitely not a what's the word, a need. So I sold the CBR because I just felt more comfortable knowing that I wasn't riding around motorcycles with having a daughter. Now I know this sounds really hypocritical because I've had this and another bike and another bike and another bike after that, but I went, not a depression, but I went into this sort of just hazy personality where I was never really happy. I mean, I love my family, I love my daughter and everything, but I was always a bit like I had my guitars, which is nice. Went to a little bit of a depression, just not having something. We had our daughter, and just realised I just wasn't happy. Obviously, again, I was happy with my family, I was happy with my daughter, I was happy with my work environment, all that. But I just realised that it was the bike, because anytime I was around bikes, I was just so much happier with my life, and just knowing that there's something like this around me. And my dad noticed that quite a bit too, and he still had the XJ registered. He's like, look, I know it'll make you happy, it'll make me happy, because he said, you're buying it off me. Do you want it? I said, yeah, I do. And again, the maturity coming out, I was like, well, I can't afford it. And like, I won't, you know, because it's his business as well, I won't tell you, but it was piss all amount per week to own that bike from Dad. It was piss all. Like, I didn't even notice. It was less than the fuel, the cost for the bike. So I had the XJ for ages, and didn't ride it a hell of a lot because I had a really nice little Suzuki Swift that was modified. I like that car. But it was lower, it was just a cool car. So when we moved house, I put the bike in the shed, and I couldn't really afford to pay the rego, because at this point, I don't think I knew that I could do 3 months rego on the bike. I had 3 months regos on my vehicles, and you can't do it for more than one vehicle at a time. So I couldn't afford the $500 something it was for the XJ. So I left it in here. I'm like, oh, I'll save up, and I'll pay the rego, and then I'll get to ride the XJ again. Which failed, because I thought it was a different month. And when I went to pay it, I realised I was a month over. Now, you get 3 months in Australia to pay your rego, but you can't ride it in that 3 months. So I ended up waiting 4 months, went to pay it, and you can't, the rego's cancelled. And I didn't have the $700, $600, $800 to get it re-roadworthied, re-registered. So I kind of dropped the ball there. So it was just a paperweight sitting in the shed, so I had to sell it because I just couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford to get re-registered and roadworthy because of my stupid mistake. And I went all sad again. Didn't have a bike for quite a while. I think it was probably a year and a half, maybe, Probably not that far, but close enough to that, probably a year. And then I needed something, and Mum and Dad really backed me up, because I didn't have any savings at the time at all. And Mum and Dad said, look, we'll go halvesies. I mean, I had to pay Mum back and I had to pay Dad back, but I said, look, we'll go halvesies and you can get this bike. Not an expensive bike, I think $4,000 was the max. But you'll get a bike, you'll be happy, and because it's a big part of our lives, mine and Dad's life. Motorbikes are always going to be involved, no matter what they are, small, big, or whatever. So I got a RF 900 from an old bloke in Benalla. It was $3,300, 30,000 Ks on it. It was awesome. It was a typical purple 90s. There'll be a photo that comes up. Typical 90s sports bike, 4-cylinder sports bike. I loved it. And I noticed something. It was starting to get a bit rattly. Not like timing chain rattle, but not that aggressive. I was riding home on it and I heard this massive and it didn't affect the bike a hell of a lot, but it was making it misfire and just almost like it skipped a tooth or something on the timing chain. It was like the bike was just like you'd throw it, it was just really friggin' weird. It was not happy. A big clonk. So something went massively out of adjustment, and I had it for a little bit, couple of weeks. Dad never really had time to help me because he's busy, which is that's fine. And I thought, well, I'm not going to even look into this, because when I looked into it, I'm not going to go into it now, but when I looked into it, someone told me, yeah, that's happened before. It's about $1,100 breakdown of the motor, so you take the motor out. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know I got quoted, we think we know what it is, it's going to be about this much to get it out. So it was about $1,100 worth of work, maybe even $2,000 if they found something worse. So sold that bike, and I got a really good return on it. I think it was $2,800. We paid $33, $34. Now again, I still have to pay the bike back, but it was like $2,800 return, which was pretty damn good. I actually sold it to a disabled guy who knows of this company in Melbourne that turns all the mechanical things like the clutch, the gear shifter, everything into something that you can control with your hands, like only as a track bike or something. And he found a company that can do these things like under a certain speed, training wheels come down and the bike just sits like that. That was crazy. I didn't realize he was disabled till I went and dropped a bike off, and I was like, okay, I don't know how this is going to work, but mate, you do you. So I sold that and started looking again. Now, I didn't want to just buy another fill-in bike, because the RF was a bit of a fill-in bike. Cool bike, but just wasn't something I always wanted. So I started looking again. Spoke to Dad a bit. I think it was only, again, not even a year. And he said, look, I'll help you, which is great, amazing thing. Like, he said, I'll help you because I want you to be happy. Would let my parents do. Disclaimer, I'm not spoiled at all. I'm almost 30. I'm 30 in August. Any money I've ever borrowed off my parents, I have to pay back. And just a few people have mentioned that I'm a bit of a spoiled kid, and again, I'm 30. But any money that I've ever borrowed will eventually be going back to them. So I put myself in these positions, but their Dad's just there to enable me in a good way. So anyway, Dad said, yeah, I'll help you. But he said, I recommend you go for one of these. And he said, like, I'd be more inclined to help you if you bought something like this. I was like, you don't have to tell me twice. I mean, it's an awesome bike. Again, I got the final say on it. But I remembered how much I like the XJ. And this is just a fancy XJ. It's an R200 GS, by the way, if you haven't seen any of my other videos. So started looking, found a few that were within my reach. One was in Brisbane, which was beautiful, blue, which I wasn't too keen on, but the bike was just mint. And I would have had to ride that home around when the bushfires were here, and you know, I think it would have cost me $200-300 to get up there, and then like $200-300 in fuel, and maybe a couple of stops along the way to get home. But yeah, we found this one in Geelong. It was about the right price. Dad, you know, like I had to sell my ute to fund about half of it, and then Dad funded the other half, and we went from there, and then that's what I ended up with. So yeah, this is probably a really boring conversation for you guys just to listen to, but I like to talk and I like to edit, so even if this gets no... That scared the shit out of me. That's the air compressor. Anyway, yeah, and then I ended up with this. You're always looking on bike sales and things like that at other bikes and cars and all that, because I need to buy another car soon. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but I ride my bike pretty much every day I go to work. So yeah, that's all the bikes I've owned over the last, I don't know, 20 years? Wow. Yeah, 20 years. Hopefully there'll be more to come, more bikes. This will be sticking around because it's just so damn good, but I'm tempted to go back into trials bike riding a little bit, just a tiny bit. Like an entry level trials bike, C grade, there's A, B and C and novice. You're not going to go less than 3, especially in Victoria. Maybe up in Queensland you can get them a little cheaper. But yeah, that might happen in the future when money's a bit more stable and I have a little bit more time to play with. But yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the 20 minutes I just sat and spoke about bikes. Again, I know these don't get many views, but I just like to talk about these sort of things, and I love to edit my videos, and yeah, so okay guys, bye. I also recommend you guys do this. It's a really cathartic way to think, like just to relax and think about all the stories, because like every single one of those bikes has a story. Like the Puck's my first bike ever, the Puck 50 I think it was. Puck's my first bike ever, my RV90 was my first manual, my TY was my first trials bike, the road bike was the first road bike I ever had. There's just a million stories. If you're interested in hearing about those stories, they're not boring. They're not boring stories, but I just like to sit and talk in front of a camera, and some people like these sort of things while they're doing their homework, just to hear something, you know, something running in the background. Ambient noise, white noise, I think that's the word. Anyway, okay, bye.